A room looked so normal that I almost stepped into it before remembering I was standing inside a storage unit. It was September 2022 at an older self-storage place in Sacramento, a few blocks east of Power Inn Road. I was there to estimate the contents of delinquent units before auction. Most days were simple. A manager cut the lock, I took photos from the doorway, and we moved on. The manager was Luis. He had been running the property for about 6 months. The place had orange roll-up doors and new security cameras bolted to buildings that looked 30 years old. We started around 9. It was already hot enough that the door handles burned through my gloves. The first units held broken furniture, plastic bins, and old paperwork. Then we opened C38. It was rented to someone named Martin and 4 months overdue. Luis cut the lock and raised the door. Inside was a living room. Beige carpet covered the concrete. A gray couch sat against a drywall partition. There was a coffee table, a flat-screen TV, framed photos, and curtains hung across the back metal wall where a window should have been. A floor lamp was on. Luis said, "What the hell?" The room smelled like laundry detergent and old carpet. Somewhere behind the TV, an electrical fan made a low hum. I took a photo from the threshold. Every frame showed the same man, maybe 45, with a shaved head and wireframe glasses. In one, he stood near Tower Bridge. Luis leaned closer. "I know him. His name's Dean. He rents in B building." He checked his tablet. Dean's unit was paid up. I tried to make it ordinary. Maybe Martin had helped Dean move or bought his furniture. Storage units collect other people's lives all the time. Then I saw the shoes under the coffee table. There were brown work boots and worn New Balance running shoes. On a hook beside the fake doorway hung a light blue windbreaker. Dean was wearing the same jacket in the Tower Bridge photo. Luis called him. He asked whether Dean had ever stored furniture in C38 or given anyone permission to keep his belongings there. Dean said no. Then Luis asked if he owned brown Red Wing boots and a blue windbreaker. Dean went quiet. Why? Luis told him to come to the property. While we waited, we opened C39, another delinquent unit. C40 was current, but when Luis checked the account, it had the same phone number as Martin's. C39 had been turned into a bedroom. The bed was made with a dark green comforter. Shirts hung from a portable rack. The air was warmer inside and smelled like vanilla body spray. A framed photo showed a young woman sitting in a restaurant booth. Luis recognized her. "Kayla rented a unit near the office." I said, "Close it." He lowered the door, then stopped. Light was showing under the bottom. Those buildings had one bulb near each entrance. The glow in C39 came from behind the fake bedroom wall. Luis raised the door again. We listened. A fan was running back there. He walked around the bed. I followed. The rear drywall had been cut into a narrow door and painted to match. There was no knob, just a finger hole. Luis pulled it open. Behind it was a passage framed with raw lumber. Extension cords ran along the floor. The metal divider between C39 and C40 had been cut open, and strips of foam covered the sharp edges. Beyond it, I could see the corner of a kitchen counter. We should have left and called the police. Instead, we looked through. C40 contained a fake kitchen and dining room. Cabinet doors had been screwed onto plywood. The sink had no plumbing. The refrigerator was an empty shell with magnets on the front. A grocery list was clipped to it. Milk, eggs, rice, cat food. Luis said Kayla had a cat. A purse sat on the dining table. Luis had seen Kayla carry it when she paid rent. He called her and asked her to check her apartment. We heard her open a door through the phone. A cabinet slammed. "It's gone," she said. Luis told her to wait outside and call 911. We backed out and locked the front gate. Dean arrived before the police in a white plumbing van. He looked annoyed until Luis showed him the photos. The windbreaker had disappeared from his apartment 2 weeks earlier. He thought he had left it at a job site. The boots were supposed to be in his hall closet. 2 officers arrived. One stayed with Dean while the other entered C38 with us. Up close, it was worse. A ceramic mug beside the couch had a chip in the rim. Dean owned one with the same chip. A Comcast remote had black tape over the battery cover, exactly like his. Old copies of the Sacramento Bee were folded inside a cabinet the way Dean kept them for packing. The officer asked when Martin had been in his apartment. Dean said he had never met anyone named Martin. They searched C39 and C40, then opened C41. That unit was listed to a landscaping company, but Luis said the card had failed after the first month. Shelves filled the front half. Plastic bins were labeled with first names and apartment numbers. Dean 214, Kayla 3B, Marcus 118, Ellen 26. Inside were clothes, mail, spare keys, receipts, and printed photos. Other shelves held rolls of carpet, paint cards, cabinet handles, and light switch plates. It looked like a supply room for rebuilding apartments. At the back was another narrow door. The passage connected the units. Peepholes in the fake walls looked at Dean's couch and the bed in C39. That was where the officers found the cameras. They were small Wi-Fi models sold for home security. One was hidden inside a smoke detector. Another sat behind a hole in the TV stand. Their cables met at a network switch connected to a portable hotspot. The officer unplugged the hotspot and bagged it. Luis found another panel farther down the passage. It was held in place by cabinet magnets. Behind it, the corridor continued toward the end of the row, crossing units that were not scheduled for auction. We followed the officer's single file. Fresh sawdust covered the floor. Cut pine and spray adhesive stung my nose. A DeWalt drill sat on a folding chair. The passage ended behind C47. Luis checked the account. C47 was rented under the name North Valley Staging. It was current and had been paid 6 months ahead. The officer pried open the panel. On the other side was my kitchen. I recognized the white cabinets first, then the gray counter and the small burn mark beside the stove where I had dropped a pan. My apartment was in Arden Arcade near Bell Street. The layout was common. The details were mine. A cracked blue bowl sat beside the sink. A Safeway flyer from Howe Avenue was stuck to the refrigerator with a bottle opener magnet. My black hoodie hung over a chair. Nobody said anything. The officer asked, "You live here?" "This is a copy of my place." Luis thought I meant the floor plan. I picked up the flyer. A sale item was circled in blue ink, just as I had circled it on the copy in my apartment. The fold was the same, too. The hoodie had a Chevron receipt in the pocket. The last 4 digits of my debit card were printed at the bottom. That receipt had been on my counter the previous night. The officer told me to put it down. There was no bedroom yet. The fake hallway ended at bare plywood. Pencil lines marked where another doorway would go. A clipboard rested on the counter. It held photos taken inside my apartment, my front door and shoe rack, my bathroom, me asleep on the couch with the television on. I had no idea when that one was taken. Luis backed out. I kept staring at the couch because the blanket on it was mine. I had noticed a torn corner while doing laundry the weekend before. The copy had the same tear. The officer searched the kitchen and found a camera inside a phone charger. It had a micro SD card. He asked if I recognized the charger. I did. I had bought 2 identical ones at Target. One was beside my bed. The other had vanished from a drawer. The police cleared the row. Martin was not there. They found tools, more cameras, and a folding cot behind C45. The property owner arrived with a lawyer and told Luis to close the entire C row. The police took the hotspot, memory cards, clipboard, and several bins. They let me take one camera that had not been installed. It was taped beneath a drawer in the copy of my kitchen. I wanted the serial number and did not want it left there. I drove straight home. There were no signs of forced entry. The windows were locked. I called a locksmith from the parking lot and paid for same-day service. The missing hoodie was real. So was the charger. The blanket on my couch had been replaced with one that looked almost identical, but the tag was different. I slept at my brother's place. At around 2 in the morning, Luis called. Someone had cut through the rear wall of the storage complex from the drainage lot behind the property. The cameras on that side had gone offline for 11 minutes. By the time night patrol found the hole, most of C38 through C47 had been emptied. The fake rooms were gone. So were the bins the police had left behind. Luis said the walls had been unscrewed in sections and carried out through the opening. Whoever did it knew which pieces to remove first. They left scraps of carpet, wiring, and a box of hinges. Martin never returned. The phone numbers on the accounts were prepaid. The ID used for C38 belonged to a man in Fresno who had reported his wallet stolen. A month later, I got an email from a storage company in Reno. It thanked me for signing a new lease and asked me to verify my contact information. The unit was 10 by 30. The billing name was mine. What bothered me immediately was the milk in the refrigerator. The guy paying me said the owner had been dead almost a week, but the jug was cold, half full, and stamped August 23rd. It was August 19th, 2019. Back then, I picked up moving jobs with an old Ford box truck. Most came through Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist. I hauled anything people could not fit in a pickup and worked alone unless the customer promised to help. This job was in a suburb west of Detroit, south of 8 Mile near Telegraph Road. The customer, Derek, said his uncle had died and the family needed the house cleared before an estate sale. He offered cash and 20 extra if I came that afternoon. I got there around 2. The August heat had made the steering wheel sticky. The street smelled like cut grass and hot asphalt. Derek waited beside a dark blue Chevy Equinox in a gray Lions shirt and clean white sneakers. "You the mover?" I said yes. "Good. We gotta be quick. My aunt is meeting the realtor at 5. He shook my hand while looking toward the house across the street. The lawn was freshly cut. Derek unlocked the front door with a key from his pocket. The air conditioner was running hard enough that my shirt started drying. The living room held a sofa, recliner, television, and a heavy oak cabinet with glass doors. Derek pointed around. "All of it goes. Bedroom set too. Garage if there's room." "Where are we taking it?" "Storage unit in Southfield." On the phone, he had said a house in Redford. He rubbed his nose and said plans had changed. That happens on moving jobs, so I let it go. We started with the sofa. Derek nearly stepped through a floor vent, so I told him to take the light end. While we worked, he talked too much. His uncle's name was Ron. First, Ron had cancer. Later, it was a heart problem. The family lived in Ohio, except for a daughter in Warren who would not help. Families are messy. I kept moving. The house did not look empty. A newspaper on the kitchen counter was dated Sunday, August 18th. A coffee mug sat in the drying rack. The dish towel near the sink was damp. "When did Ron die?" I asked. "Last Tuesday." I looked at the newspaper. "Neighbor probably brought it in," Derek said. He answered so quickly that I remembered it. When I came back from carrying an end table, he was watching the house next door through a gap in the blinds. "Nosy people around here," he said. He told me to check the refrigerator before we shut off the power. That was when I saw the milk, sliced turkey, eggs, and a covered bowl. Nothing smelled bad. "This is fresh." Derek looked inside for less than a second. "My aunt stocked it. She stayed here after." "The aunt coming at 5? "Yeah. Can we keep moving?" His voice was still calm, only tighter. I should have left. At the time, I had a half-loaded truck and a story that was sloppy but possible. Maybe Ron was in a nursing home. Maybe there was a family dispute. People lie for stupid reasons. I wanted to get paid and go home. Before we touched the bedroom, Derek texted me a storage address near 12 Mile in Greenfield. It was a real place I had used before. We loaded the oak cabinet. Its glass rattled and dust behind it caught in my throat. Under it was a white pill. Derek picked it up before I could. "Blood pressure," he said. I had not asked. The bed was made. Brown work boots sat beside the dresser and a phone charger was still plugged in. Derek told me to take the dresser but leave the mattress, even though the mattress had been on his list. "It's trash," he said. It looked almost new. I pulled the dresser out and one drawer opened. Inside was an orange prescription bottle labeled Ron, filled August 12th, with pills still in it. Derek shoved the drawer closed hard enough to shake the mirror. "Personal stuff stays. Then empty it before I move it." He threw clothes onto the bed. A work badge fell out. The photo showed a gray-haired man with a thick mustache. It said Ron, listed an auto parts plant in Livonia, and did not expire until 2020. Derek snatched it up. "He was still working?" I asked. "Part-time. With cancer?" He stared at me. The friendly act was gone. "Do you want the job or not?" I said I wanted proof that the owner had agreed to have his furniture moved. "He is dead." "Then show me a message from the family." Derek put the badge in his pocket. "You already loaded half the house." He stepped closer. He had maybe 40 pounds on me, and his shirt smelled like cigarettes. Then someone tapped on the bedroom window. A shadow moved behind the blinds. Derek yanked them up crooked. An older woman in yellow gardening gloves stood outside, speaking through the glass. Derek pointed toward the street. "Go home, Linda." Linda stayed there. I opened the window about 6 inches before Derek could stop me. "What are you doing in Ron's house?" she asked. "We're moving furniture," I said. "Where is Ron?" Derek reached for the window. "You know he passed." Linda looked at me. "He was here this morning." Nobody spoke. "I saw him by the garage around 8, she continued. "They were arguing." She pointed at Derek. Derek slammed the window. Linda pulled her hand back. "She's confused," he said. "Her husband has dementia. She mixes things up." Linda shouted through the glass. Derek lowered the blinds and told me to finish the dresser. I backed away. "No, I'm unloading." He seemed to be working out how much trouble I could cause. "You got paid to move this stuff." "I haven't been paid." "You will at the unit." "I'm putting it in the driveway." His right hand went into the pocket with Ron's badge. Something besides his keys and phone pressed against the denim. I walked past him toward the front door. He followed. "You're making this into something it isn't." The truck faced the street with the rear open. I climbed into the cargo box and released a strap. Derek stood at the bumper. "Leave it. I need my truck empty." I said leave it. His voice had dropped. Next door, Linda's curtains moved. She was still watching. Derek grabbed the loose end of the strap. For a second, we both held it. "Take it to the unit, get your money, and forget the rest," he said. "What happened to Ron?" A lawnmower started behind the houses. It made the scene feel stupidly normal. Derek let go. "Ron owed me money." "Where is he?" "He left." "You said he died." "He left this morning then." "Fine. He's gone." I climbed down and headed for the cab. Derek stepped in front of me and said, "Just finish." I went around the other side. His shoes scraped close behind me. I opened the driver's door and reached behind the seat for the tire iron. I kept my hand on it. Derek stopped. "Move," I said. He did. I locked the doors and started the truck. I missed reverse and hit neutral. Derek walked to his Equinox, and I thought he was done. Then he started it. I backed out with the cargo door open. A blanket slid toward the edge, so I jumped out and pulled the door down. The Equinox rolled from the driveway before I got back in. I called 911 while driving east and explained that Derek claimed the homeowner was dead, but a neighbor had seen him that morning. I checked the mirror. The Equinox was 2 cars behind me. "He's following me." She told me not to go home. I headed toward the busier part of Telegraph. Derek stayed behind through 2 turns. When another car got between us, he sped up until I could see him leaning over the wheel. Ron's sofa and cabinet were in my truck. I kept wondering if Derek wanted something hidden inside them. At a red light near a strip mall, he pulled into the lane beside me and lowered his passenger window. "Pull over," he shouted. I faced forward. He hit his horn. "That's stolen property in your truck." The dispatcher heard him and said officers were heading toward us. Cars filled both lanes. A city bus stopped behind Derek, and people crossed near a Taco Bell. Derek looked around, made a hard right from the center lane, cut through the gas station entrance, and disappeared behind the building. Police met me in a pharmacy lot, searched the truck, and copied Derek's messages. The storage facility said no unit existed under his name. Linda told officers she had seen Ron and Derek arguing beside the garage that morning. A little after 8, Ron got into the Equinox. Derek drove away with him in the passenger seat. Ron never came back. They found him 2 days later in woods behind an industrial road near Inkster. The news said a man connected to him had been arrested. Police told me nothing more. Derek was not Ron's nephew. He lived 3 streets over. The furniture was held as evidence. Ron's sister later had it collected and said most of the garage was empty before officers reached the house. A television, tools, guns from a locked case, and boxes of coins had been posted under different names around Detroit. Most sold before investigators found the ads. One listing was still active when an officer showed it to me. It was for the oak cabinet from my truck. The photos had been taken in Ron's living room before I arrived. In the last picture, the cabinet doors were open. Ron's work badge and the orange prescription bottle sat on the glass shelf. The listing had gone up at 9:06 that morning. Linda saw Ron leave in Derek's car at 8:17. I used to do survey work for small construction companies, mostly boring jobs where you spent the whole day staring at stakes, tree lines, and numbers on a screen. This happened in July of 2008 when a company hired us to mark out part of an abandoned limestone quarry in western Pennsylvania. They wanted to build a warehouse complex on the flatter section near the old access road. It sounded simple. My helper, Nate, even joked we'd spend more time fighting mosquitoes than doing actual work. The quarry sat a couple miles off a state route, hidden behind overgrown trees and rusted fencing that had fallen over years earlier. There were old conveyor supports sticking out of the ground and piles of broken rock that looked almost white under the afternoon sun. The place had been closed for years. According to the paperwork, everything underground had been mapped decades earlier. Our truck barely made it through the dirt entrance. Dust coated the windshield, and every time I stepped out I could smell hot stone mixed with old engine oil. The only sounds were insects and the distant hum of traffic you couldn't actually see. The first morning was normal. We set up the total station, placed control points, and started checking elevations. Around lunch, I switched over to the ground scanner we occasionally used when companies wanted to avoid buried utilities. It wasn't perfect, but it usually showed large voids or major objects below the surface. About halfway across the main bench, the display showed a long, empty space underground. I figured it was interference. I rescanned from another angle. Same result. The empty area stretched almost 300 feet in a straight line. It was too clean to be random noise. It looked like a tunnel. Nate walked over chewing crackers. "What are you looking at?" I turned the screen. "Either this thing needs calibration, or there's something under us." He stared for a second. "I thought the quarry maps covered everything." So did I. We marked the coordinates and kept working. Equipment gives bad readings sometimes. Metal debris, mineral deposits, even buried machinery can confuse it. I didn't think much beyond that. Later that afternoon, I compared the location with the old survey sheets folded inside our truck. Nothing. The tunnel wasn't there. The next morning, our supervisor called. "Anything interesting?" "Scanner found a void." "You sure?" "Pretty sure." He laughed. "Probably an old blast chamber nobody bothered drawing." That explanation sounded reasonable enough. By noon, we decided to walk over and see if there was any sign of an entrance nearby. The quarry walls had dozens of cracks and old cuts. Most were shallow. A few disappeared into darkness for 10 or 15 feet before ending. About 200 yards from where the scanner showed the void, Nate noticed cooler air coming from behind a pile of collapsed rock. "You feel that?" I did. There was a narrow opening hidden behind brush and loose limestone. Someone had cleared enough space for a person to squeeze through. Fresh tire tracks stopped nearby. That caught my attention. Not old impressions. Fresh. We grabbed flashlights from the truck. Neither of us wanted to crawl inside, but curiosity has a way of making bad ideas sound reasonable. The opening widened after about 20 feet. Suddenly we were standing inside a surprisingly large tunnel carved through solid rock. The ceiling was reinforced with old steel beams covered in rust. Water dripped somewhere deeper inside. Every sound echoed longer than it should have. The air smelled damp with another odor underneath it. Gasoline. Not strong, just enough to notice. "This isn't on any map," Nate said quietly. We walked another 100 feet. The floor wasn't rough quarry stone anymore. Somebody had leveled sections with gravel. Tire marks covered the ground. Recent tire marks. I stopped talking. There was electrical conduit running along one wall. Dead bulbs hung every 20 feet. Someone had installed them years ago. Then we rounded a bend. Cars, at least 20 of them. Some were pickups. Others were sedans or SUVs from different years. Dust covered the roofs, but the tires looked inflated. Every license plate had been removed. Some mounting brackets were still hanging loose. Neither of us spoke. I walked closer to an old blue Ford Explorer. The VIN plate inside the windshield had been scratched so deeply it was almost unreadable. "So," Nate finally whispered. "Yeah." Every vehicle showed signs of the same thing. Missing plates, damaged identification numbers, nothing else obvious. No broken glass, no stripped interiors, just rows of silent vehicles parked inside a tunnel that officially didn't exist. Then my flashlight landed on the wall. Someone had painted dates in neat columns. black paint. July 12th, 2008, July 9th, 2008, June 28th, 2008, June 14th, 2008. Older dates continued farther down. Each date had a number beside it, 1, 2, sometimes 4, not names, not descriptions, just numbers. Nate frowned. What do you think those mean? I don't know. I wish I'd said we should leave right then. Instead, I walked farther. The tunnel split into two directions. One branch disappeared into darkness. The other had fresh tire tracks leading away. We heard an engine. Faint. Very far off. Both of us froze. The sound grew louder for a few seconds, then stopped. A metal door slammed somewhere underground. Nate looked at me. We're done. I nodded immediately. We turned around without another word. Walking back somehow felt longer than coming in. Water kept dripping behind us. My flashlight bounced across the walls with every step. About 50 feet from the entrance, we heard voices. Not close, maybe outside. One of them laughed. Another said, "Back it up." We killed our lights. The tunnel went completely dark. I could hear my own breathing and the soft ticking from Nate's flashlight cooling in his hand. A diesel engine idled outside. We waited. Headlights swept across the entrance for just a second. Someone was moving equipment. The voices drifted away. After another minute, Nate leaned close enough that I barely heard him. Other way. I remembered the split. Instead of risking the entrance, we went back to the fork and followed the other branch. It climbed gradually. The passage became narrower, then rougher, like it hadn't been maintained. Twice we had to climb over fallen rocks. The air became warmer. Finally, daylight appeared through a crack ahead. We crawled out onto the opposite side of the quarry, hidden behind thick brush overlooking another dirt road. Nobody saw us. We didn't stop until we reached our truck by walking almost a mile around the property. Neither of us mentioned the cars while loading equipment. We just packed everything except the scanner I'd left near one of the control points. Neither of us wanted to walk back for it. Our supervisor wasn't happy. "You left a $10,000 unit? You can bill me later." That shut him up because he knew something serious had happened. We filed a report that afternoon. County officials asked questions. State police called the next day. We explained exactly what we'd found. 3 days later, the property owner insisted on meeting investigators at the quarry. By then, Nate and I stayed away. One detective called afterward. He sounded irritated more than surprised. "The entrance you described is gone." "What do you mean gone?" "Collapsed." "It wasn't collapsed. It is now." According to him, fresh blasting had sealed the entire opening beneath several tons of rock. Whoever did it knew exactly where to place the charges. A week after that, I got another call. Not from police, from the equipment supplier. The scanner we abandoned had its own tracking transmitter because replacement cost was so high. The manager wanted to know why it kept reporting new coordinates. I drove over and looked at the records. The first signal stayed where we'd left it. Then, almost 8 hours later, it moved underground. Not far, maybe 80 feet, then another 100. After that, the coordinates followed a path that matched the direction of the hidden tunnel. The movement stopped for nearly an hour. Started again. Stopped again. The timestamps lined up with overnight hours. The technician assumed someone had loaded it onto a vehicle. What bothered me wasn't the scanner. It was the speed. The coordinates matched the pace of a truck creeping through enclosed space. Months later, the warehouse project was canceled. Officially, the quarry had geological stability issues. Fences went up around the property, and the county restricted access. One detective admitted they found evidence that the site had been used as an illegal dumping operation for stolen vehicles. Beyond that, he wouldn't say anything. Nobody ever mentioned the tunnel again. The scanner was never recovered. The last tracking log I saw showed one more movement beneath the quarry after midnight, covering several hundred feet before the signal disappeared for good. Whoever was down there had enough room to keep driving long after the entrance everyone knew about had been buried. The rest of that underground passage was never fully searched. Thanks a lot for watching, guys. I want to hear which story was your top pick, so leave it in the comments. And if you're not done getting creeped out, go watch the other videos on the channel. Bye for now. See you soon.